So friends, good evening. On behalf of My Retired Life Foundation, we extend a very hearty welcome to all of you for this very unique session on a very spiritual topic, and that is the self-knowledge, the learnings of the two of the greatest spiritual gurus, Ramana, Maharshi. Now to talk on this particular topic, I have got a very close friend of mine, a very, very dear friend of mine, Viswanadhan. Vellarkat Viswanathan, whom I know for last 50 years, I think. I believe we studied together, we were brought up together from the graduation level to till now. So we know each other very well. And let me introduce Vish like this, that he's essentially a very analytical person, a very scientific oriented person. He had a very, very rich career in science and technology area in India and the USA. But at the same time, he had a very deep sense of philosophy and the spirituality from the very early part of his life. And therefore, for the last few active years of life, we spent time with the Jiddu Krishnamurti school in Sayadri, Western Ghat in Maharashtra, where also I happened to meet him for a couple of days. I had the opportunity to spend time with him. So he's a very a person who has got a deep insight into the spirituality and the philosophical aspects. So when he volunteered to talk on this particular topic, I was extremely happy about it. Vish, thank you very much, and the floor is open to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sengupta. I'm very delighted to be here, and I thank for this opportunity, not only Dr. Sengupta, but all of you, MRL Foundation. What I will try to do in today's talk is to convey faithfully what Ramana Maharshi and Krishnamurti are saying without any distortion. And when it comes to understanding, we are all in the same boat, and I am not in any better position than any of you to grasp the full meaning of what the great teachers are saying. So I'll begin with Ramana Maharshi with regard to self-knowledge. Actually, Ramana Maharshi never gave lectures, never wrote big philosophical books or anything. He was considered a mystic, and he has given a lot of mystical poetry, and he spoke to people at various levels. So to really understand the various aspects of what Ramana Maharshi is saying, it is useful to go through the analogy that he gives of the types of people. He said there are three categories of people, and he compared them to wet charcoal, dry charcoal, and gunpowder. So the people who are like wet charcoal, they cannot be lighted up no matter how hard you try. Whereas people who are like dry charcoal, you apply heat for a certain amount of time and then it will catch fire. And the highest category of people, gunpowder, they are like gunpowder. And as soon as you bring fire near them, they explode. The reason why I gave this analogy is not to judge ourselves or judge anybody else, but to understand really that Ramana's statements and answers, they're tailored to the maturity level of the sadhaka, which means that you won't find consistency in the way that you expect an academic philosopher to have. So they're spontaneous and they may appear contradictory, but underlying message is one and the same. So with this, I want to introduce the terminology, the words that Ramana Maharshi uses, which is sometimes different from the casual meaning that we associate. So first of all, he uses the word self in two different senses, the small self and the capital self. So the small self basically is the activity of the mind and is identified with our body and our senses, etc. And the capital, what he calls as capital self in English, which is in Sanskrit known as Atma or Sakshi Bhava. It refers to the sense of awareness about which we may not have an idea right now. So we'll talk about it a little later. He also uses the word Sachidananda sometimes, Sat Chit Ananda, to refer to the capital self. And the word God is also used often. He uses the word Isvara. And what he meant, again, is, or rather depends on the person who is asking it. Because many people believe in personal God. And though ultimately there is no such thing as personal God or a particular God to which you pray to, he does answer the questions in that relative context. And the mind to him is a collection of thoughts, and there's no mind without thought. And then he uses the word heart lotus, which is Hridaya Kamalam, another word for it, which is the site of what he calls as the capital self or Atma. And another word that he often uses is jnana. By jnana, it is not meant, it is not mere knowledge, but it is experiential realization. That is, the understanding is experience, is living. It is not merely book knowledge. And there are two other words that he uses that are important for us to know, which is Turiya and Turiyatita. The word Turiya means the fourth state. He refers to it. It is a state of awareness, and to indicate that it is different from the three states that we usually undergo. That is the dreamless sleep, the dreamy state, and the state where we are conscious, we are awake. So these three states are something that we are familiar with. And we have absolutely no idea. I have absolutely no idea about what this state Turiya actually means. But Ramana states that this state is close to one of the three states that we have, which is deep sleep. In deep sleep, there are no thoughts. Just as in the state of Turiya, there are no thoughts, and there is no identification with self. And the word Turiyatita actually means that it is beyond all states. There is a state of oneness. So some of these words, they don't have a definable referent. By that I mean, if you say a cup, you know what actually a cup is, and you can refer to it. But words such as the Hridaya Kamala, Turiya, Turiyatita, or God, they have no referent. So we have to treat that as a black box, as unknown. And it is important not to imagine, not to create your own thoughts around these words, which basically obstruct our progress to understand them. So another important point is to really understand the words that do not have a referent. Ramana Maharshi advocates the approach of negation. By rejecting what is false, we approach the truth. So actually, in the same point has been made in Upanishads also, where the approach is called Neti. There are several books, short books, for which authorship is attributed to Ramana, and they are at various levels. The easiest one to read and to understand verbally, you have to delve into it really to grasp the meaning of it. That is Who Am I? I just want to break here and tell you that if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to stop me and ask, because that is important. So the more difficult book is Upadesha Saram, and for the mature sadhaka, it is the 40 verses and Vichara Sangraham. So these books are all available as PDF files, which you can perhaps go through at leisure. So let us begin with the reason why he actually made this particular question famous. Who am I? It is really to start the spiritual engine for self-knowledge or jnana. Before I go into this, I just want to give a very brief biography of Ramana Maharshi. I mean, to the extent that it is important here. So he was growing up in the southern city of Madurai, and when he was studying 9th grade, he actually experienced a fear of death, a strong fear of death. Then he imagined what actually it means, what death means. So when my body is going to be taken to the cremation ground and it is going to be cremated, then what happens to me, the sense of me? So Ramana did not go through various stages for realizing this state of I-ness. He immediately understood that he is not the body, because the body is temporary, it goes away. But the self, the sense of I cannot die. So once he understood this sense of realization or death experience struck him immediately and strongly. So this stayed with him throughout. And later, the history has it that he goes to Tiruvannamalai as a young boy of 15 or 16, and he was identified by other people, other seekers, sadhakas, and he was given a place and so on, but we don't go into all that. So here the basic point is, for the beginner, he suggested that this question of who am I can be inquired into. And you have to negate the body and the five senses and even your own mind as the answer to the question of who am I. The small self, which is also known as the ego or individuality, when you are earnest in seeking the question of who am I, this sense of individuality ceases to be. When the question of who am I, however, has to be put very, very earnestly, then if you stay with the question, and if every other thought is rejected because you are interested in finding the truth of the matter of who am I, yourself, then if all superficial thoughts fade out, then the small, what he calls as small self, it fades out, and the awareness emerges from what Ramana calls as heart lotus or Hridaya Kamalam. So since this is a natural state, no further effort is necessary after that, because it is your sahaja sthiti or natural state. So the important thing is who are the people for whom this sahaja sthiti happens. So there are two kinds of people from the earlier analogy that I gave you, antarmukhi and baharmukhi, that is those who are turning inward and those who are externally oriented. So those who are externally oriented, who see the world as it is, and who are identified with their body and the world, they are perhaps like wet charcoal. Whereas those who are totally inwardly oriented to explore what I am, what am I, they are like gunpowder. And in between, there is this dry charcoal, because for them, the state of the world is both real, but at the same time, there is a strong sense of wanting to inquire into who am I. So it is like, so Ramana says that it is like the rope snake analogy. That is, as long as the world is real, self-realization is not possible, because you only see the world, the body as the me, and so on. Whereas if the I is real to you, the realization is real to you, the world is unreal to you, then you don't see the rope. So either when you see the rope, you don't see the snake. When you see the snake, you don't see the rope. So self-realization happens only when you see the world outside as an illusion. So if that is the case, then what can anybody do about self-realization? Is it at all feasible for an ordinary man like me? So in this book, Upadesha Saram, I will go through the first 3 slokas around this point. The first sloka says that Kartrurajnaya praptaye phalam karma kim param karma tajjadam. Most people are stuck in the cycle of karma. Basically, we do things expecting results. And the results come by the order of God. Karturajña prapteya phalam. And the results, the cycle of karma, that's not divine. It is merely a law, the law of life. And it is not divine. Karma kimparam, karma tajjadam. It is inert. The law is inert, like Newton's laws. They operate, they work, but by themselves they are not divine. The second sloka says, Kriti mahadadav patana karanam phalamashashvatam gati nirodha. By your actions, you get results, but the results are temporary. And being attracted to the results causes one to fall into the great ocean of samsara, action and reaction. And that is really the obstruction to liberation or realization. And the third sloka says, Isvara arpitam nechaya kritam chitta sodhakam mukti sadhakam. Actions which are performed, offered to God and done without desire, that is for mental self-inquiry. Only such actions open the door for liberation because they are not done with any desire. So the third sloka gives the clue as to what needs to be done for liberation. But again, it is something that you cannot control directly. That is very important to know that. Now, I'll briefly go over the first few paragraphs of the real 40 verses. Ulladu Napadu in Tamil. Here it talks about awareness. And here I want to give you this analogy that Ramana Maharshi frequently gives to understand what is awareness. So when you see a movie, there is the seer, and there is the movie on the screen, the scene, and there is this substratum or screen on which the movie is played out. The seer, the movie played on the screen, and the screen, this is the triad. The screen itself remains unaffected by what is projected on it. So since I see the world, which is the drama or the movie that is playing on the screen. Yes. Any question by anybody? So the screen, the individual, as well as the movie, they are three different things. They must have a common source because they are all tied together. And that common source he calls it as pure awareness or God. As long as there is this individuality, the me, the seer exists, the other two must exist. The world should exist, and a belief in a separate God must exist. So the only key here is when I or the individuality is lost, only then there is this awareness that he talks about, from which all the three arise: the world, the concept of God, as well as the self. So then the question arises, if the loss of individuality is what is needed for realization, then what does it mean? What does loss of individuality mean? When this question of who am I, if you are earnest and put the question, who am I, and to whom this is happening, a particular crisis, a problem is happening. When you ask this question to yourself, this question brings an end to the small self, because the small self is the collection of thoughts, and none of these thoughts answer the question of who is the real me, who is the real I. This bringing an end to the self is explained as the surrender of ego, or psychological non-action. This psychological non-action is also what is meant in the third sloka of Upadesha Saram. So this triad, the world, the individual soul, and God, they are assumed to be eternal in most religions. Many organized religions talk as though the world is real, the individual soul is real, and there is another God. There is a God that overlooks the world and the individual soul, including some schools of Hinduism. Ramana Maharshi rejects this assumption, as it is the ego or the mind that creates the triad, and it must disappear. When there is the surrender of the self, the world must disappear. Without surrender, there is no self-realization. So then, what is surrender? We'll go into it. In the traditional schools, this viewpoint is known as Ajata Advaita, or non-causal monism. Or you can say that it is non-duality without a cause, oneness without a cause. You may be surprised to know that Ramana studied Bible because he studied in a school where Bible was taught. So he explained to some seekers what Bible verses meant in this regard. Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what you shall put on. Take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed. Bhagavan interprets this as total surrender. The true spiritual aspirant, his pursuit of realization is so total that he is completely indifferent to even the basic amenities. So that is the strength of the power of earnestness. He is simply indifferent. Biblical verse says, take therefore no thought for tomorrow, for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. So Ramana explains, God never forsakes one who has unconditionally surrendered. If it happens that God does not take care, if it appears so, it must be to facilitate spiritual realization. Ramana gives the example of a prey caught in the jaws of a tiger. There is no letting go of the prey, and there is no letting go of the serious aspirant by the divine. All your needs will be supplied to you. And Ramana also points out that certain schools of Hinduism miss the point completely. Visishtadvaita, for example, or qualified monism, says that the individual soul, when it is surrendered, it becomes the body of the universal soul, but retains individuality. Ramana points out that this is logically absurd because the universal soul cannot have a separate body made up of individual souls. There is only oneness. Other religions also talk of this surrender. Buddhism, for example, one of the well-known statements is Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. I seek refuge in righteousness. And the word Islam itself means surrender. So surrender is well known to be the true guide, the true gateway to realization. Now, I will stop at this point about Ramana Maharshi, and I will briefly talk about Krishnamurti, because in the teachings of Krishnamurti also, this comes. And it is important to understand what is surrender further, so that we'll get an idea, we'll grasp what actually is meant by surrender and how actually it leads to realization. So, to briefly go over the background of Krishnamurti, Madame Blavatsky is a Russian lady who founded the Theosophical Society in Adyar, Madras, with the express aim of bringing the world teacher into existence. So she felt that Theosophical Society can aid in bringing the new world teacher and a new world religion. Krishnamurti, as a young boy, as a young lad of 10 years, was identified as the future Messiah, and he was groomed to be the Messiah of a new religion called Eastern Star. This was prophesied by Madame Blavatsky. However, when Krishnamurti was brought up by Anibesandt and Theosophical Society, he grew up, but he rejected the role of a Messiah given to him, and he dissolved the organization given over to him, and he held that self-realization is not an organizational matter. You cannot set up an organization or a religion for self-realization. And he made an emphatic statement that people remember every time. That is, truth is a pathless land, as it can never be static. You cannot approach truth as if it is a fixed objective, fixed object, and then you go towards it. Again, the word truth as it is used here, it has no referent, and it cannot be defined in an absolute manner. So we'll come to what he means by truth a little later. So Krishnamurti also, like Ramana points out, that our very thinking process creates a center within our consciousness, which is the self. The center is the self, and this leads to the division between self and the non-self, mine and yours, my ideology and your ideology, my philosophy and your philosophy, my matter and your matter. The very existence of self makes conflict inevitable. But the self cannot get rid of itself. That is, we identified already with our body. When you say, I go to Hyderabad, I go to Madras, it is actually your body that is going. And because you identified yourself with the body, it comes naturally to you to think that you are the body and you are the one who is traveling from place to place, etc. And as if the body is you. And the self, which includes the intellect, not just the body, it will not come to an end just because you put some conscious effort to say, I am not the body, I am not the body, I am not the intellect, I am not the intellect. You can repeat thousands of times, but that does not bring it to an end. So the startling statement of Krishnamurti in this regard is that the observer is the observed. What he means is, there are, in any observation, there is this triad: the observer, the act of observation, and what is observed. When complete observation happens, this duality between the observer and the observed comes to an end. And that is the state of surrender referred to by Ramana, the analogy of the movie playing out on the screen. So actually, what is meant by observed? What is observed? Let us say we are afraid. We tend to imagine a state called courage, and we pursue that. But fear persists, and there is a struggle to be fearless. So here, there is this observer, there is this fact, the psychological fact called fear. And as long as the observer considers himself to be separate from fear, there is bound to be duality. So what Krishnamurti is saying is, as long as you separate yourself from the psychological fact of fear, there is bound to be the division, duality. If you are fear, then there's nothing to be done. That is, if you understand that you cannot separate yourself from fear, which means you are fear, the fear is you, then there is nothing to be done except surrender to the fact that you are fear. When you truly surrender to the fact that you are fear, that is when magic happens. So this surrender, however, does not happen automatically or by itself. However, for the earnest seeker, it comes to you. So Krishnamurti says, reality or liberation must come to you. It cannot be appealed to. You cannot pray to it. You cannot entice it into your little cage by doing puja, bhajan, and all the rest of it, by offering it flowers, by placating it, by suppressing yourself or emulating or following others. Ramana calls this grace. So this grace happens when actions are done without expectation. If you do puja, you may get results, but the results you get, you may enjoy them. However, you have to pay for it in the end. That which you ask for, work for, you get. It is not the truth. If you want and if you petition or put effort, you will receive a reward, but you will not. You have to pay for it in the end. And this is exactly the law of karma that Ramana refers to in the first sloka. However, remember that the act of surrender, it is not like a physical surrender that happens when you lose a battle and you surrender to your enemy. That is different. This comes with inner observation, understanding what you are. It is the awareness of inner movement, whether it is attachment, whether it is anger, whether it is fear, jealousy, a feeling of violence, whatever it is. It is the observation of these feelings that allows one to be free. This awareness is the key to self-knowledge, knowledge that frees you, or jnana. So I will talk a little bit more about the conflict that I earlier mentioned, the conflict between the self and the non-self, wanting and the struggle in wanting, not wanting. So Krishnamurti calls it as the corridor of opposites. As in the earlier example, I mentioned fear. So when you're afraid, you imagine a state called courage. But fear remains. You may act bravely sometimes when you're gripped by the feeling of courage. So that does not end fear. The conflict between acts of courage and the actual state of fear exists. So you will find that even Jawans who gave up their lives to fight for the country, when they were fighting, there will be fear inside their mind, but they put on brave acts. The fear is not gone. They may receive awards, they may lose their life, but this happens. And the same thing is true of other pairs of opposites, like, for example, generosity and meanness. When you act generous and when you find that people are not reciprocating, then you may feel to be, you may feel that you should not be as generous as you want, as you are, as you were. So kindness and meanness, there is another pair of opposites. So to really be free of these opposites, it is important to abide by the original feeling. That means to understand your feeling of violence, don't create an artificial construct called non-violence that creates a conflict and violence does not end. So this is what Krishnamurti says leads to this understanding of oneself and dissolving the small self, which is basically a basket of all these feelings: meanness, ugliness, goodness, so-called goodness, piety, jealousy, anger, ambition, all these feelings. So at this point, I want to take a break and perhaps open up the discussion, if that's okay with you. If anybody would like to make a point or contribute your points.
See, I am Prakash here.
Yeah.
I just want to know, actually, I just trying to understand. So what Ramana Maharshi told, is it different than what Adi Shankaracharya has propounded? Or no, Aditya?
Actually, Adi Shankara came to it. The reason why Ramana Maharshi appealed to me is because he's more contemporary. I mean, he was just 100 years ago, he was there. I mean, he was during the year 19, he was very active during 40s and 50s of 19th century. And he could answer the disciples' questions directly. Yes, Adi Shankara talked about oneness, talked about Advaita. And Ramana Maharshi himself says that Ajata Advaita is the true doctrine. So it is not different in that sense. But Adi Shankara talked about so many different things. It becomes, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to become a philosopher studying various texts that Adi Shankara wrote. So I thought that, Ramana Maharshi and Krishnamurti, they gave a more contemporary and direct vision of perhaps what we can attempt.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Vishwanath,
Yes.
Samudra speaking.
Hello.
Nice, very, very nice to hear you, and it's the awakening for us. But can you just say what a people like us, retired people, how to practice to get into that self-realization? What are you told, Ramana Maharshi, J. Krishnamurti, etc. But what is the practical ways to go? What you told is correct, that who am I and what is my ambition or what is my feelings, why that feeling, etc. is the solution. But how to practice it?
Yeah, that is the thought of reward. That is basically what they're saying in different words is when we do things, do we have this thought of reward bothering us? Then there will be, if the thought of reward bothers us, then obviously you have to face disappointment when your actions don't get the results that you wanted. So you go through the high and the low. When you get the reward, you get a high. When you don't get the reward, you feel a low. So what that's the key to this self-knowledge or realization basically is to act, to be able to act without the expectation of a reward. Or when the thought of reward arises, is it possible to watch that thought, not let go of it, and not suppress it? That is one thing. And second thing is, we all go through the feelings, the so-called Arishad Vargas, the Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, all these feelings. We all go through those. And as long as we don't understand them completely, these feelings are going to torture our life. So the important thing here is to watch these thoughts as they arise. And this is where what Krishnamurti says, holds value. That is it, can you watch this thought? Can you watch this thought of jealousy as it arises without naming it as jealousy? So you get a feel for what actually it is. Our problem is, as long as you have a feeling that is so and so is doing better than me, it is a movement it is a mental movement of comparison. And when that thought arises, we simply call it as jealousy. Oh, that's a wrong thought I got. But that doesn't reveal its nature. Because if it truly revealed its nature, then such a thought does not arise again. So it is, so on the practical front, even getting to know the content of our thinking to begin with, and secondly, the origin of our thinking. Where does this content originate from? If you reflect on it, then basically the thoughts retrace itself. Basically, you will find that this thought has no strong roots. The root, out of the root, it comes out. So, I mean, this again, one has to experiment, and each one's experiment is unique to himself. It is not possible to handhold somebody and say that, no, this is how you need to think, this is how you need to understand your thoughts, and this is how you'll bring it to an end. So that is what traditional gurus have been saying and doing all the time for thousands of years. Whereas Ramana Maharshi does not give a direct answer. He says, you put the question of who am I, but you don't come to a one answer that wipes out self. That very question brings an end to the thought that arose in you, and which basically means that the ending of self is possible through that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Basically, you are telling experience, analyze, then only you will get into actually how the things have come and how we can overcome that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I won't use the word analysis because it is an intellectual activity.
Okay.
But it is important to have a feel for it. It's important to really understand it without the word. The word is, without using the word jealousy or anger or ambition.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, good evening. If I may talk for a couple of minutes. Yes, hello, good evening, Mama. I am Dr. Harish here. I am a nephew of Mr. Viswanadhan. So it was a nice talk presentation, Mama. Yeah, so somebody was asking quite elderly to me that about practical way of is there any practical way of practicing and all. What I believe and what I could get it that there is no specific way or a definitive way of getting into it, and there is no analyzation or nothing is there. You just be there and somehow you just observe it, and then only you will be able to. It is sometimes I feel difficult to even explain, and somehow I sometimes really feel that to explain it to others, it is sometimes very difficult. Only when you sit and just be observe yourself, then only it will come to you automatically. That's what I don't know. Sometimes it happens to me like that. But when we try to analyze and try to explain it to others, then there may be areas of conflict and all. They will tell that no, this is not the way. That is not the way. This was not written in that sloka or in that by somebody else and all. This is the thought it comes to me.
Yeah.
Mama, if you could shed something on that, yeah.
Yeah. Earlier I mentioned that Krishnamurti's statement that truth is a pathless land. So the meaning of that is we don't have to agree on what one truth is and then devise a way to reach it. Actually, it is unique to yourself and it is not static. So it is important to really know what your issue is, what is the content of your problem is, and then stay with it. The most important point about surrender is the key to understand it. That is staying with it and not say that I will overcome it through effort. See, the struggle, the effort happens when you don't surrender to the content of your problem.
Right.
Viswanathan garu.
Yes.
Viswanathan garu.
Hello, Chappandi.
Viswanathan garu, I am Prasad, your classmate.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Prasad, I want a small question.
Sure.
Sir, regarding this lecture, even though you are trying to give a lot of information regarding this Jiddu Krishnamurti garu and Ramana Maharshi garu, we are feeling it abstract mostly. But I request you, if there is any chance that there are some incidents happened in the case of Ramana Maharshi garu or Jiddu Krishnamurti garu, so that we will have more, get to know more information and more ideas of what our great scholars they are trying to tell us. Any examples in their life you can give us with elucidation, then we may be in a position to understand better these the abstract philosophy of these scholars
Yeah. See,
with examples.
yeah. The important thing, something common between Ramana Maharshi and Krishnamurti is that they gave analogies, not examples. That is, the reason why they didn't give examples is because for every example, there is a counterexample. That is, what I meant is, let us say, Krishnamurti, for example, gave back, he was given 5,000 acres of land when he was made the head of the Eastern Star religion to establish the religion and to propagate the whatever he believed, whatever Theosophical Society taught him through that organization. He gave it back. So you may think of it as an act of self-abnegation, not having the self. But even in giving, there may be self. See, for example, Bill Gates gave billions of dollars, but it is called Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He wants his name to be perpetuated forever, associated with the billions of dollars that he's giving. He wants the name of, he wants to stamp his name on it. There is self in it. So it is not a selfless act. The billions of dollars that Bill Gates gave, it is not a selfless act. I'm just giving an example so that even if you give an example, there is a counterexample. You may feel that, Nadar Foundation gave so much money, but again, it is Nadar Foundation. That self is there. So if you challenge this way, any action that you do, then you find that people are after perpetuating their name and fame. It is really the freedom from such strong anchor that is the key to liberation. And that's what they use the word surrender, etc. So I'm not sure whether I could satisfy your answer, but I must say that there is a definite reason why Krishnamurti and Ramana Maharshi avoided giving examples most of the time. The analogy, like they talk about, for example, psychological immobility, that is staying with facts. That fact can be anything, but unless you experiment staying with fear, staying with anger, staying with jealousy, unless you experiment, the examples, if I give the example of some person who has overcome jealousy, that is not adequate enough for you. You have to experiment it and come to the truth yourself. Did I answer your question a little bit?
Yes, sir. I could answer. What most of us, most of the things you clarified. Any experiences they had, not only an example. Of course, your example is very clear. The charities we may give with some name, and that's why it again reflects some to our, our greatness, how to promote for the time immemorial. It's not the case like that. But any experiences they had, so that we can elucidate something from them, from these great scholars. In their experiences, not actually, of course, you have given some examples, and how they experience the way of things, their experiences in their life.
See, let me tell you, Ramana Maharshi, he left his family, he left the house in which he was staying when he was a teenager. If you take this as an example, you'll be misled. He is not going to advocate. Nobody advocates leaving their homes at the age of 14 or 15 and going in quest of, spiritual realization. No. In the same way, that is, you can give many examples which mislead you. So what Ramana Maharshi is saying is, yes, you can inquire into yourself. When you are a grihastha, you don't have to be a sannyasi. You don't have to be living in the forest to experience the non-dual. Very clear about that. So that is, each person is born with a different fate. You may call it. What they are saying is, the body takes birth to fulfill a certain responsibility, and you are going to do, the work gets done through you, whether you like it or not. So the reason why I brought it up is because your conscious effort to follow somebody through an example is not what frees you. It is the truth, the understanding of the truth that frees you, because examples can be misleading. I do not know if I'm able to convey this. I mean, it's a very important question. Why we don't take examples? It is a very important question. But examples are limiting. There are counterexamples, and it is important to know the truth behind the various particulars. The particulars are examples. I'm not sure whether I made sense to you, but I tried to.
Thank you, Mr. Nangaru. I could grasp something by virtue of this discussion. I could have some idea. I mean, instead of pondering about their thing, we have to try to solve ourselves. Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I put one question?
Sure,
Yeah.
by all means.
See, can you please recommend any books on Krishnamurti, so that, because as I understand, I have realized that it is a little difficult to understand Krishnamurti's philosophy. But can you suggest some simple books which can
Yes.
throw light on his thinking?
Yeah, sure. In the website, there are short booklets. What is it? What is true religion? And I mean, there are so many books. Actually, I sent a couple of links to Dr. Sengupta, and we can share with you the links which allow you to access those books. There is a booklet called Who Am I? There is a booklet called Upadesha Saram. There is a booklet called The Real 40 Verses. There is a booklet called Vichara Sangraham. These are all short booklets authored by Ramana Maharshi. And in the website of Krishnamurti Foundation, you see several. The most basic ones, are the booklets that I mentioned, and I sent the links to Dr. Sengupta. Perhaps he can share with all of us.
Okay, thank you.
I will share it. I will share it.
Yeah.
Anybody else would like to ask a question?
Viswanadhan, I want to ask one thing. All these spiritual leaders are free of fear?
All the what?
Fear is part of our life.
Yes, correct.
So these spiritual leaders are free of fear?
Actually,
they have got fears in their life? Or they are free of fear against them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. Actually, I mean, there are examples when you are actually gripped with fear, then there is only action. That is, the thought of fear comes after the incident. And that is when the observation.
Not incident. It is before the incident also, maybe.
Oh,
because
yeah.
always fear of the fear of welfare of our own people and family and all. This may not be after the incident. This is maybe always. Always, maybe.
Yes, actually, you are absolutely right. That is that fear, that is fearing for tomorrow. That basically is the search for psychological security. So the search for psychological security creates fear, as long as there is a tomorrow for us, as long as you believe in a tomorrow, there has to be fear. So in the biblical quotes that I shared, is it possible for you to consider that today is the only day you have?
No.
That is a state of non-fear. Then there is no such thing as psychological insecurity.
We always think of today and tomorrow. May not be
Yeah.
may not be thinking about yesterday, but general thinking is today and tomorrow.
Yes, I know. And we hope that tomorrow will be better than today. So this
Yes.
earnestness, if it is there to understand oneself, then that earnestness dissolves tomorrow, dissolves modified future, which is, that is, yesterday I made this mistake. Tomorrow I will not make this mistake. This is what I learned from yesterday. I will practice it tomorrow. So this thinking process comes to an end.
And another thing I want to say to you,
Yes.
suppose if a person does some donation or something good to the society, and if it is known to the public by his name, what is harm in it? Others may follow, others may be motivated to do it. So what is the harm in mentioning the name?
No, you see, the point is not whether there is harm or not. That is, what I'm saying is, this has been going on for 1,000 years. The pursuit of name and fame in multiple forms. Somebody becomes famous by fighting a war. Somebody becomes famous by being a martyr. Somebody becomes famous by earning a lot of money and distributing to people. So none of these people have seen the ultimate truth, which is the understanding of oneself. That is, it all depends on your earnestness. It is not a question of right or wrong at all. I am not saying that it is wrong to put your name on a donation that you make, etc. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that it strengthens your ego. And when you strengthen your ego, you are bound to feel the high and low of it. Your life will be in emotional turmoil, conflict, and so on. So for the person who does not have that, for the person who doesn't associate with name and fame with his own body, he is in a state of Satchidananda, you can say. And that is what the text says. I'm not saying I am not there. I am not a realized person, but I'm only conveying what the great masters have said about this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody, any other question? Any other question? If there is no other question, I think let's try to come to the end of this particular session. You know, sometimes the philosophy becomes a little bit difficult for many of us to understand, to understand the basic tenets of philosophy, because we have not gone through the scriptures, we have not gone through the many of these readings. That's one aspect of it. And second is, many of us have led a practical life. As a result of it, sometimes it is difficult for us to understand what the great scholars have tried to say at different points in time. But what Viswanathan was trying to say is, and that's a very, very important thing to understand, that the ultimate realization of the truth, ultimate realization of everything lies in the surrender. And when you're talking about surrender, it is not talking about the physical surrender. It is not that you are surrendering to an enemy or surrendering to superpower, but you are trying to understand what you are, who you are, and move above the feelings and try to set the feelings and what you call emotions as they come, as they happen. Rather than telling that you are angry, if you can move above that particular stage and see the anger as it is, then probably there will be no anger at all. So that's a very great great highest stage of sadhaka which you talked about. It's very, very difficult for us to understand. But definitely, Prakash rightly told that we will send these what you call the links which have been sent by Vish to some of you who are interested in it, so that you can go through the latest, the contemporary, let me put it that way, the spiritual, two great spiritual gurus of the world, Ramana Maharshi as well as Jiddu Krishnamurti. I have gone through some of the books of the Jiddu Krishnamurti, courtesy Viswanathan once again. They're difficult to understand, but no doubt about it. But once you read and read, probably will try to understand and internalize some of them actually. So thank you very much, Vish, for spending your time. Thanks all of you for being with us today. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very much, Viswanathan. Thank you very much.
much.
Thank you,
Thank
Viswanathan.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Viswanathan, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Viswanathan garu.
Thank you very much, sir.
So much, sir.
Really nice it was.
More
Thank you very
lecturers
much.
to
God
follow,
bless you.
please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, more lecturers to follow, please.